Hi everyone, my name is Liz. I read and welcome to another video. So this is going to be my series review of the Jackaby series by William Ritter. This is going to be both spoiler free and a spoiler section. I just finished yesterday, I think it was, the last book in the series, and I have some feelings, so I think I need a spoiler section for my well-being because I need to talk about things. This series is, I like to use the term neo-Victorian, meaning it's set during the Victorian time, but it's a historical fiction. So how do I say it? It's a historical fiction set in Victorian time, and usually there's kind of modern morals or values portrayed in the fiction. So in this case, there is a strong female protagonist, there's some liberal values and concept kind of portrayed in the text, while also having manners as you will. So it's a neo-Victorian, it's also an urban fantasy mystery, and I really enjoyed. As a whole, this is a really good series. I do recommend it. The synopsis is Jackaby is a seer, so he can see magical auras and see things that normal people can't see, and he's a detective. He's a detective solving kind of mysterious crimes or paranormal. Our main protagonist, though, is Miss Rook, and Miss Rook is originally from England, and she's kind of running away or starting afresh in America, specifically I believe New England, and she kind of ran away from home. She wanted to strike out on her own and have her own adventure. Her father is a paleontologist, and she always wanted to do field work and be on a dig, and she did get an opportunity, but the opportunity kind of fell through. So instead of going back home, she decided to strike out on her own and move to America, and she stumbles upon Jackaby because she is needing a job. She found the advertisement in the newspaper, and so she ends up working for Jackaby, who's a unique character, obviously for his special abilities, but also because he's just kind of a little bit socially awkward. He doesn't really know how to relate to people very well because he grew up with the sight. So they're both very smart and clever, and the two characters have really good banter between the two. There's some additional characters as well. There's Jenny, who is the ghost who lives at Jackaby's residence. Jackaby is living in a haunted house, and Jenny is the ghost who is haunting the house, but she ends up becoming a really close friend to Miss Rook, and they have a really close relationship. So all the books in the Jackaby series is Jackaby is book 1, book 2 is Beastly Bones, book 3 is Ghostly Echoes. The last book is The Dire King, which is the last book in the series. Books 1 and 2 I gave a 4-star rating, and books 3 and 4 I gave a 3-star rating. This series started out really strong. Overall, I really love the characters and the setting. That's my favorite part. I really enjoy stories set in the Victorian time, and when there's a paranormal element, that's amazing for me as well. But I love Jackaby and Miss Rook as characters. I like Jenny, and also there's a love interest for Miss Rook. His name is Mr. Barker, who is a shapeshifter, and the romance between the two characters is very sweet and enjoyable to read. Jackaby and Miss Rook, like I kind of mentioned before, have really good banter. They're both very strong and smart and clever, and so the banter between the two is really enjoyable to read. The setting is fantastic. For one thing, it's set in New England, so it has a very European feel with like cobblestone streets, horse-drawn carriages, and plus they live in a haunted house. Miss Rook lives with Jackaby on site. It's a haunted house, so there's the haunted elements, but also there's some like interesting mythical additions to the house. All those things were great. Plus, it was a mystery. Now, not everyone likes mysteries, and this is for sure a detective mystery series, and so there is some kind of crime or something has happened, but there's some kind of paranormal element to it. So in this world, there's magical creatures like vampires and werewolves and shapeshifters and fairies and pixies and like all sorts of mythical creatures you find in an urban fantasy or a normal fantasy. And so that's where Jackaby comes in, and he solves these crimes and Miss Rook helps him. Books 1 and 2 followed that format of a detective mystery, and so that's why I like them a lot more than books 3 and 4. Books 3 and 4 kind of transitioned away from the detective format and really leaned harder into the urban fantasy, and that's where the series really started to lose me. I still really recommend it, and I think I'll touch more in my spoiler section of what my problems were, but overall it was a really good series. I absolutely enjoyed all the characters and the paranormal. Like, I love paranormal and urban fantasy settings, and so I was destined to really enjoy this. If you like the Infernal Devices, this is a series you would really like. If you like the Something Strange and Deadly series by Suzanne Dennard, you would really enjoy this series, so give it a try. I will say the mystery part was very predictable for me. I don't read a lot of mysteries, so I couldn't compare it to any kind of thrillers or anything like that, but I didn't mind that it was predictable because there were so many other elements I enjoyed a lot more, and in a way the fact that it was predictable, I enjoyed it. So I don't know, it really depends on how you feel. So I personally recommend it. But now on to, I think, my spoiler section of the series. So if you don't want to be spoiled for the series, maybe say goodbye for now, and maybe pick up the series if it sounds like something you're interested in. And starting from now, I'm going to move on to the spoiler section of this video. I really loved this series. I kind of had a journey with the series because I read this a long time ago, like a few years back, and I read books 1 to 3 and I really enjoyed it. And I actually enjoyed book 3 when I read it, but on reread I disliked it. So I read books 1 to 3 a couple years ago, and then I found them on audiobook through my library, and I thought I would give it a try, and I really enjoyed book 2 again second time around, but book 3 really lost me. Like I said, it was because it was shifting away from the detective mystery part of the storytelling, and they really shifted towards an urban fantasy. What ends up happening is Jackaby, he's the seer, so he has kind of a past, and there's a big bad kind of after him. And we find out that by book 3, and what's really been happening is the big bad has been orchestrating these crimes in New Fiddleham, I think is where it is. And Jackaby didn't know that all along, but the big bad, the Dire King, he's orchestrated these crimes in order to draw attention away from himself. And we learn about this in book 3. And there's a bit of a detective portion in book 3, but then it moves away from that to a more urban fantasy setting where they're more like fighting bad guys, and they're going to the underworld and trying to get information from someone who's died. And I don't know, I just felt like it lost me a bit. And then by book 4, the whole book was focused on the Dire King, and there was no real mystery in the book, and I found that really frustrating because I think that was one of the strongest bits of the series, was the detective mystery part. And I felt like the author was trying to do too much in one book, and I was constantly overwhelmed and wasn't sure if I was understanding what was happening. There was a lot of fighting happening, which can be fun and exciting, but like I just found it really overwhelming, and I wasn't quite sure what I was reading and if I was understanding what was happening. There was a big kind of part where Jackaby solves the crime, and even when he was like laying it out point by point, I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So that's one of the reasons why I docked a star down too, is I was overly confused, but also because the author was trying to do too much in one book. What I realized afterwards, what I wish the author did, was actually extend the series out further if he was set on doing this big story arc with the Dire King. Because usually what happens in detective shows is usually there is one large overarching arc. Is that right? Like there's usually one storyline that's an overarching arc, usually involving a big bad villain, but in each episode you touch on it, or each book you touch on it just a little bit until you get to the end where you do all the big stuff then. And I just felt like it just got overly rushed. He really only did that arc in 2 books, and I think it needed to be expanded upon a little bit more because too much was being done in the last book. I could see the direction that the author was going, like, this is spoilers so I can talk about it. I could tell that the author was moving towards Miss Rook having the sight, and I really enjoyed that story arc for her, but I was really upset with the deaths in this book. I thought Jackaby should have died and then she get the sight, and then Charlie not die at all. Instead, it was Jackaby died and then got resurrected, and then Charlie died. And I didn't like that at all because I felt like the story arc for Miss Rook and Mr. Baker or Charlie like didn't get resolved. It didn't get resolved at all. Instead, it gets resolved in the epilogue, which I don't like at all. I didn't like Alina, I think that was her name, Charlie's sister. I just felt like that element was just thrown in there. She ends up helping the Dire King to fulfill his plans, and then even though she turned on her brother and then she righted her wrongs, in the end, after everything, after the Dire King got defeated and everything, she becomes queen of the Seelie, of the fairy court essentially. Like, I didn't like that at all. It made no sense. It was very rushed. Like, I felt like the author was trying to do so much, and so there was a lot of things just really rushed at the end, and I found that really frustrating. And I think Jackaby should have died because Jenny's dead, and there's this weird element. I remember I stopped reading this series because I was realizing I didn't pick it up at first. I was kind of shipping Jackaby and Miss Rook at first. I really liked their dynamic, and I thought that would have been a really fun element to the story, but then there was Jenny, who's the ghost who lives at their house, and really there's a relationship between Jackaby and Jenny, like a romantic one. It doesn't really happen, but there's hints there, and I didn't like it because I'm like, how does that even work? How do you have a relationship with a ghost? I don't get it. So I found that really frustrating, but after taking a break from the series and then coming back and realizing, okay, this is just gonna happen, and I accepted it. I think the last book what should have happened is Jackaby die, and then he could have just end up with Jenny, because it would make sense for him to stay back as a ghost, because that would be his unresolved issue and the reason why for him to stay. But instead he gets resurrected, and then she has this weird thing where she's more human than not. Like, she's kind of like a solid ghost, even though she's a ghost, but she's solid. And it didn't quite make sense to me. What it should have happened was Jackaby die, he becomes a ghost, then he goes off with Jenny to like start their new life, and then since he's dead, Miss Rook would have the sight and continue the practice with Charlie. Like, I just thought that would have felt more satisfying. Instead, that didn't happen. So yeah, it was a bit of a downer. I kind of rushed reading it, and I wonder if I physically read Ghostly Echoes that it would be more satisfying, but I think it was just unsatisfying. So yeah, those are my feelings on the series. I still recommend it. Like, it's very possible those problems don't bother you, and so maybe give it a go. If not, that's alright. I would love to know your opinions on this series if you read the series, so please comment down below. I would love to have a conversation with you in the comments about the series, because like, I have feelings and I would love to discuss them with you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. If you have not done so, you can follow me on Goodreads, Twitter, and Instagram. And you know what, guys? I'm gonna keep reading. Bye.